United Kingdom, having qualified with Mansers in 2000, specializing in charity audits. She moved to Uganda. Can you imagine? She moved all the way to Africa in 2001 and has held different roles in non-for-profit sector. She's been an auditor, CFO, grant management advisor, board member, and treasurer, as well as carrying on training and consultancy assignments across Africa. So she has all the wealth of experience, and she has been an associate with Momentum since 2004, and has become the regional director for East Africa in 2017. Before taking up this role as a director of International Financial Reporting for Non-for-Profit Project in 2019. So I'm going to hand over to Samantha now. And I just want to say that this meeting is being recorded so that we can send it over to you after this meeting. So Samantha, over to you as you guide us through. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Temitope, for that warm introduction. It's a real privilege to be here with you all. I can see some people have already started introducing themselves in the chat. It'd be great if you could continue to do that so that we can all see who else is in the room. As Temitope said, this isn't the kind of meeting where you're just here to listen and consume. We want to share some information, but then hear back from you. So it's just nice to know who else is in the room. So after that nice introduction from Temitope, we're going to spend about 20 minutes just to introduce you to the IFR for NPO project. Sorry for those of you who are already familiar with it, in case you are, but that will just be a quick reminder, and it just makes sure we're all on the same page when it comes to the later parts of the meeting. And then we're going to do a deeper dive after our group breakout sessions. So the first thing I'd like to do is play you a short video. So it's just 2 minutes long, which is also on our website. But I think it gets in a nutshell all the key aspects around this project.
IFR for NPO is a 5-year initiative to develop the first ever internationally applicable financial reporting guidance for non-profit organisations. It's coordinated by Humentum and the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy. You probably know that businesses have international financial reporting standards, and governments have international public sector accounting standards. But the not-for-profit sector has no equivalent. This undermines the consistency and usefulness of financial reports and ultimately harms the sense of trust and accountability that is so central to its effectiveness. The current system is also inefficient, with duplication of effort for both NPO and funders in meeting multiple and at times conflicting financial requirements. An academic study in 2014 received responses from 179 countries. 72% of respondents agreed that an international standard for NPOs would be useful. So, the IFR for NPO project is answering this call. By engaging a wide range of stakeholders, the new guidance will command support from the accounting community and NPOs, as well as those that fund and regulate them. The guidance is being developed in a technically rigorous 3-step process, involving a consultation phase and development of an exposure draft, with final guidance available from early 2025. With the goal that at least 10 countries will use the guidance by 2030, with more to follow. The project has a technical advisory group involving national standard setters from every continent and an official observer from the International Accounting Standards Board. And the practitioner advisory group helps us ensure the guidance will meet users' needs. The founding funders share our vision for this game-changing project. We have the opportunity of a generation. We can increase accountability and transparency while reducing inefficiency in the current system.
Great, so I hope you enjoyed that short little video. I think maybe just to reiterate what Temitope said at the beginning, it's so important for us to keep in mind the types of organizations that we're talking about when we are looking at financial reports. The numbers, the financial statements don't really mean much separate from all the wonderful activity and work that NPOs do. Now, it might be in Nigeria, like Uganda, you use the phrase NGOs, non-governmental organizations. And NGOs are a subset, pretty big one, of other types of non-profit organizations. So you might also have non-profit universities or clinics or even some societies or political parties or all sorts of things which might fall under the description of a non-profit organization, which are different from NGOs. But if you're an NGO, that's fine. It is absolutely for you. So let's take which financial reports in particular are we talking about with this project. It's really important that we distinguish and we're really clear which types of financial reports this project is looking at and which types of report it's not looking at. So if we think about all the transactions of an NPO entered into the accounting system, and that nice accounting system summarizes them, classifies them, groups them so that you can extract various financial reports. So some of those reports will be for internal use by managers, by the board. Some of those reports might be for donors. If you've got, especially if you've got project funding or restricted funding, donors often want a report that's specifically about their project. And then finally, there's these annual audited accounts or general purpose financial statements, which are for the entity as a whole. And all these three different reports should come out of the same accounting system. That's in an ideal world. I know it doesn't always look like that on the ground, but that is how it should be. So the question really is, which of these three types of reports is this project about? So this project, we're focusing on these annual audited accounts, the general purpose financial statements. But of course, it's really important to acknowledge that they are linked because you want all the reports to come from the same accounting system. So we're also working on another project called Money Where It Counts. Initiatives happening in different places as well, which are helping to harmonize donor reporting formats. So donors realize that having a different type of report for every single donor is a problem. And there are projects to harmonize that, but that is separate and complementary to this project, which is more about the year-end audited accounts. So I just want to get that clear from the beginning so that we don't have cross-purpose conversations later on. So which stakeholders are being considered for this project? Well, we are responding really to the challenges expressed by three broad groups of stakeholders. The first is the users or the readers of those financial statements. So because they're general purpose, they are designed to meet, they're supposed to meet the needs of a range of different users, right? So that would include donors, but also regulators, service users, or you might call them beneficiaries or clients or members, depending on the type of organization that you are, as well as the public. You might also have your bank. To open a bank account, they might need to see your audited accounts. Your collaborating partners, you might want to have financial transparency. Suppliers might want to look at your creditworthiness. Employers might want to see about the organization. So there's lots of different people who could have an interest in looking at the audited of the NPO. Now, of course, not all organizations publish their financial statements. That's a sort of separate thing, but this is about making sure that the format and the content could meet all the different desires and needs of those different stakeholders, those readers. Now, within this group of stakeholders, large donors are particularly influential, as we talked about earlier. Now, if the requirements of this IFR for NPO guidance conflict with certain requirements from donor reports, that is going to create a bit of a headache, could cause a lot of problems. And yet donors themselves are calling out for more meaningful year-end audited accounts that they can use for due diligence and to understand their partners better. So for that reason, we've convened a donor reference group so that we can really have that conversation with this particularly key group of stakeholders. Ford Foundation are of course in there, Open Society Foundations and others are joining, the Nippon Foundation in Japan and some other foundations are joining up, and also bilateral governmental donors as well are going to be in that donor reference group. So that's the first really important group of users, those who are going to be reading the financial statements. The second important group is, of course, the preparers, the NPOs themselves. And it's really important that there can be a kind of cost benefit. What users might want everything, every piece of information, maximum transparency, everything in the kitchen sink. And preparers might say, but that's not cost effective, that's too onerous, that's too difficult for us to provide that. So there's a cost benefit, there's different trade-offs. What's practical and implementable, and what would meet all the needs of different readers. So we're going to be balancing those different stakeholder needs. And then the third group is auditors. Obviously, we have some in the room, wonderful people who provide assurance about whether the financial statements present a true and fair view. So as Temitope said, I live in Uganda. I've lived here for 20 years. I would really say it's my home. And what we see in Uganda is that sometimes we see audit reports that say, in our opinion, these accounts give a true and fair view, full stop. And that bit at the end which says in accordance with a framework, they don't mention a framework because there is no applicable framework. So it's really tough for auditors when there isn't a framework to refer to and to audit against. So crucially, the other aspect of why it's so important to involve auditors is that the front line. They're at the front line of supporting NPOs to understand and implement technical guidance about financial reporting. So it's really important that they're on board. So it's important to mention that we don't actually represent any one type or group of stakeholder. Our job as a project is really just to balance the costs and benefits to different stakeholders, hear all the needs and try and come up with something that best meets the needs of all. So what is this project actually going to deliver? What change will it bring about? So what we see is that some of the challenges expressed by stakeholders stem from this core problem that there is no internationally applicable standard for how NPOs prepare their annual financial statements. Now, where countries don't have their own national standard, which is true in Uganda, and I believe it's also the case in Nigeria, that can lead to inconsistency even within the same jurisdiction. For large international NGOs, you can get inconsistency between countries, which then makes consolidation very difficult and expensive. So also then what happens is when funders look at the financial statements of their potential grantees, they sometimes find it really hard to assess financial capability or to understand the wider context for a particular project. And that slows down the due diligence process and makes the grant making process harder. It also results in duplicative processes for due diligence, for financial reporting and auditing. So it really is a sort of part of the problem. It's not the only problem, but part of the problem is this lack of guidance. So the lack of clarity and consistency ultimately reduces transparency in the sector. And that makes funders nervous, especially about double funding fraud. You might have come across where some NPOs report the same cost to two different donors. That's something that really donors are quite anxious about, and it's difficult to spot with the current focus on project level reporting. So the solution, we believe, the solution that we're working on as a project is internationally applicable guidance for how NPOs should prepare their annual audited accounts, their annual general purpose financial reports. It's important to be clear that it would be up to a particular country or jurisdiction to decide whether to adopt or to align to this guidance, and whether certain NPOs should be required or allowed to follow it. So in Nigeria, it might be up to the Nigeria regulator or part of government to say, yes, this guidance will be applicable in Nigeria, and these types of NPOs will be required to follow it, and these will be allowed to but not required to. That will be really at country level, just like IFRS is now. There's no global mandate that says everybody in the world has to adopt IFRS. It's there as an international standard that countries can choose to adopt or use it to align their own national standards. What we can also see is that funders can recognize it as best practice and encourage its use whenever entities are allowed to adopt it. So it has its credibility from funders as well. So the future outcomes and benefits that we hope this guidance will bring are really wide-ranging. So for NPOs applying the guidance, it means that they'll be better to demonstrate their capacity and attract funds, as well as supporting the provision of, information that's useful for decision-making and governance and management. For funders, it contributes to better and more efficient due diligence, which is a win for NPOs too, so that's a win-win. And having clear guidance simplifies and improves the value of audit assurance. So one of the other really important outcomes of this project, separate from the guidance itself, if you like, is the creation of a global community of stakeholders. That's you, you're part of this community. People who are interested in and able to engage and collaborate sector-wide issues around financial reporting. And this has never existed before. So it's very exciting that as a project, we're going to be able to create this community. We are creating this community. And then ultimately, we believe that the guidance will contribute to a more resilient and accountable sector that's better able to attract and utilize funds to achieve all this wonderful change and good that these organizations do. So that's the big picture. So who is behind this project? So it's being implemented by two organizations in partnership, and that's Humentum and CIPFA. So Humentum is a global association or global nonprofit, and we convene NPO professionals and inspire sector-wide change. You may have heard of Lingos or Mango or Inside NGO if they used to run training courses in Nigeria. Well, those three organizations merged to form Humentum. So we've been in this space for a very long time, even though we actually only made this organization in 2017. So that's Humentum, and I work for Humentum. And then our partner, the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, is a UK-based professional accountancy organization. And they have standard setting roles for local government and for charities in the UK, but they also play an important role as an international convener on public sector accounting issues. And both of us are ourselves NPOs. So between us, the project partners, we're well connected to a range of stakeholders within the sector that are critical to this project. So this really is a by the sector, for the sector project. There's nobody else dictating anything. It's really driven by people from within the sector, which is very exciting. So the seed funding to enable the project to launch has been provided by the Open Society Foundations and the Ford Foundation, which we are incredibly grateful to. This is a difficult project to bet money on because it's long-term, it's infrastructure, it's very complicated, international, and Ford is one of those organizations that has that vision for really improving the international infrastructure for the nonprofit sector as a whole, and a big vision, which has been wonderful. So thank you, Ford Foundation and Open Society Foundation. Now, as well as our project partners, we have advisory groups, absolutely crucial. So they offer their perspectives and expertise on a voluntary basis. So the technical advisory group is made up of national accounting standard setters from 5 continents. So these are especially countries that have their own national standards for how NPOs prepare their accounts. And you can see there's the usual suspects of the UK and the US. There's Canada, New Zealand and Australia. There's also Sierra Leone and Colombia. And you'll see, so Sierra Leone, West Africa, and there's also East Africa are there, represented by Chris in Rwanda, and we have a representative from PAFA as well. So even though not many countries in Africa have their own national NPO accounting standards, we wanted to make very sure that Africa was well represented on the tag. And then the PAG, the Practitioner Advisory Group, is preparers, users, auditors, and we're deliberately and proactively seeking to build and maintain diversity in those groups. We're still a bit low on representation from Latin America and Asia, but that's something we're really working to build up. So information about the details of all the members and all the meetings are on the project website. The process is fully transparent. There's nothing happening behind closed doors. The meeting recordings, the minutes, the technical papers that are presented to those groups are all available on the website. So if you also have opinions about the things that they're discussing, you can share. The advisory group's job for the time being is almost finished, because they've helped us prepare the consultation paper, which I'll talk about later, but then they'll come back and be very active in the next stage of the project. So we've looked at why this project is important, and we've clarified what the project will achieve and who the project partners and stakeholders and advisors are. But let's just get a sense of the how and when by looking at the different phases and how they're broken down with the timelines. So the project is using a 3-phase process, which is equivalent to all other accounting standard setting processes. So phase 1 is the consultation phase, and the key output is a consultation paper, which presents questions for structured input from stakeholders like yourself. And we'll talk more about that later on. It's a key part of why we're having this meeting, so you can understand more about it. Then the second phase is the phase where we're actually developing, the development phase, and we analyze all the feedback from the consultation and use that as an evidence base to develop draft guidance, which is then exposed for comment. And that's called an exposure draft. Then the third phase takes stock of the feedback from the exposure draft and puts through final changes before launching the final guidance, which is expected in early 2025. Might sound like a very long process, but believe me, this is speeded up version compared to how long it's taken to get IFRS and IPSAS developed. This is a super quick equivalent of an accounting standard development process, because there's so much consultation and reaching out to people. If we wanted to do it all by ourselves in a room somewhere, it would be very quick, but getting feedback and buy-in is really what takes the time. Now you can see from the slide here that the beginning, the final guidance itself, the end of phase 3, is really actually just the beginning, because it's only after that that we get adoption, training, transition to actually using the guidance. And it's only after it's widely used that we'll see some of the benefits. So it really is quite a long-term, but very visionary and very important project. So that's really why there are 2 aspects to the project design. So one aspect is the technical rigor that's being applied in the guidance development process, led by SIPFA. And then the other aspect is the stakeholder engagement, which is being led by Humentum. And then we're actively reaching out to stakeholders such as yourselves all over the world, to regulators, national professional accountancy organizations like ICANN, donors and NPOs, so that they can participate in this development process, so that they're ready and willing to adopt it when it's ready. So how are we doing in terms of outreach? Well, I can share, I haven't given you an updated slide for the 31st of October, but it hasn't changed so much. So we've already got a lot of engagement from people all over the world, which is really exciting. So the countries in blue on the map are those who have individuals in those countries who signed up and registered their interest in the project. They've signed up to the newsletter or forum. And they include a really broad range of stakeholders, both international and local NPOs, their auditors, accountancy bodies, regulators, donors, and others. And we track the types of people so that we can check that it's a really broad range. The yellow flags on the map show members of the technical advisory group, of national standard setters, And the red flags show the members of the practitioner advisory group. And then the black flags show the various country champions working to engage stakeholders in their countries to ensure the voices are heard. And we've just recently recruited a new country champion in South Africa, so he's not yet on the map. So it's really exciting to see that people really are picking up interest and are engaging. And I'm so glad that you're all here, you're part of this process. So that was really my little short introduction. So having heard about that, now's a chance to meet some other people here and share your questions and thoughts in smaller groups. So we're going to be using a feature called breakout rooms. And once the rooms are launched, you should just find yourself in a room with a smaller number of people where you can have a conversation. So as Temitope said, it would be great if you can turn your camera on. And I'm also just going to enable you all to allow participants to unmute themselves. So you'll be able to unmute yourself and have your video on when we go into the rooms. And let me just check in the chat in case there are any questions. Now I can just see lots of people introducing themselves, which is fantastic. So I'm going to create the breakout rooms. So we're going to have, I think, 8 to 9 people in the rooms. So when you're in your groups, I might give you 15 minutes actually. I'm told that 20 has been a bit too long. Mind you, I know Nigerians, you're so friendly that if your time runs out, you're just going to keep chatting, right? You're not going to feel, oh, this is boring. So you have a chance to meet each other, find out who's in the room. And then it's a chance to really share your own reactions to what you've learned about the project from what we've discussed so far. What questions do you have? What comments? What are your reactions? So just share those within the group. And then I'd love you to discuss what benefits can you see sitting where you are in Nigeria and in the context that you have and from your part of the piece of the sector, what benefits can you see from where you're sitting? And also, what challenges can you foresee in terms of this process? We are not underestimating the ambitiousness of this project, but we're really interested to hear the challenges that we can see from different stakeholders in different countries. If you were here at the very beginning and you were able to do that thought experiment, then now's the time to share your ideas of what the benefits will be. So Temitope, let me just ask in case there's any queries, or should we go straight into the rooms?
I think we should go straight into the rooms.
Super. Okay, so
we'll
15 minutes.
in 15 minutes.
15 minutes. So it's now 1:35 for me. I think it's 11:35 in Nigeria. So we'll come back 10 to the hour. All right, have a good time. Great, so we should see people coming back from the small groups. Super, welcome back everybody. Let me confirm, can you see my screen properly, Temitope?
Yes, I can. But surprisingly, the 15 minutes was so short, we couldn't, it was just so short. But we tried to get some few things, you know. Okay,
that's okay. There's some people were stuck in the main room as well, so they've patiently waited. So welcome back, everybody, and we'd love to hear some of the highlights and some of the key items that have come out of those discussions. So it'd be great maybe just to start off with the questions or comments or reflections from each of the groups, and then maybe we can move to a couple of benefits and a couple of challenges. So with one of the groups, if you want to use the raise hand feature, that can, if you go to participants and then there's a raise hand, you can let me know that way that you want to come in and share something, or just unmute yourself and say something. You can turn your videos on as well, it will really help. All feeling, it's brilliant. Kayode, do you want to come in? Super.
Okay. Good morning to everyone. Thanks for this wonderful platform given to us to brainstorm on particular focus that centers around NPO. We quite appreciate the opportunity. I would like to speak, permit me to speak on behalf of the group, my own group, where we have 9 members. So our discussion was centered around the benefit, the challenges, and different things that we believe that might likely come as a byproduct of this project, which is a laudable one. The first one, maybe let me just center around these 2 questions that keeps giving us which is born out of our challenge. Some of the challenges we've highlighted here is how does the organizer of these project intend to bring everyone on board to every country, every participating country, so that it will not be challenging for the NGOs industry in terms of implementation of whatever standard that is going to come from this discussion and consultation. That's the first question.
Brilliant.
And the second question, yes, how to bring more people on board. What strategy do you have in place? What options you have in place to ensure that? That's the first one. The second one is about the compliance. How do you monitor the compliance level? How do you ensure that donors are really tending toward people that are complying with the standard? How do you ensure compliance? That's the second thing. So on the benefits, our discussion centered.
I'll stop you there. We'll come back to the benefits in a minute.
Okay.
But stay online. That's fantastic. There's another group. I'll just mute you for the time being, and then we'll come back just to keep the sound quality good. Thank you, Kayode. Is there somebody from another group who has a couple of questions or reflections or comments? And then we'll deal with those together and then move on to the benefits. I can see, yes, KVO. Would you like to come in?
Thank you. We are still part of Group 1. Kayode is our secretary in Group 1. We want to add another thing in terms of challenge, and that relates to the cost of conversion. It might pose a little challenge for some of the organizations and other. So we need to look at how do we address that cost of conversion from the existing standard to the new standard that will come up. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, KVO. So, your real name I can't see, I can just see KVO. But we will come back to the challenges shortly. So don't worry, that's not forgotten. But it'd be great to hear from some of the other groups. So just about some of your questions or reflections before we come to the challenges. So I can see Akintoye Olufemi. Do you want to come in? Akintoye, are you able to unmute yourself? Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you so much for this opportunity. So my name is Akintoye Olufemi from Group 2. I think our major concern in Group 2, which will come as a question is...
We're not getting you very clearly, Akintoye. Are you able to speak up a little louder so we can hear better?
Okay, so I don't know if you can hear me better now.
A bit.
Okay. So I'm saying the question that we have, which is more like a concern in Group 2, is how do you intend to carry donors along in this exercise? How do you intend to let them accept, once we are through, how do you intend to let them accept the outcome of this exercise that's being carried on? Thank you.
Can I just check, did you say how do we carry donors along? Was it or a different stakeholder group?
Yes.
Donors, wonderful, that's a great question. Okay, thank you, Akintoye. Was there another question as well, or reflection?
Hi, good afternoon.
Hello, come in. Go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon, I'm Francis. I think my question is also a follow-up from the question the last speaker just spoke about. So the fact that
Go ahead, Francis.
we have different donors having different templates, the donors along the main donors as well as the other donors, to be sure that they are going to accept this new standard and reduce the inconsistencies that we have.
Brilliant, thank you, Francis. Very similar question. Great. Is there any group that hasn't yet spoken? Temitope, has your group spoken?
Yes, but I think they have people that will talk more on the challenges.
Yeah,
I would like to actually hear, because before now I had discussion with two very interesting people, and they are so passionate about this project. I don't know if they can just say one or two things of their reflection. Phillips Innocent is the Director of Finance and Operations from Chemonics, and also the Finance and Director from FHI 360, Charles Esuga. I would really want to hear from them, because they are so passionate about this, and they have reflections about this. So maybe if Innocent is available, can we just hear him say one or two things about it, then we go ahead to Charles. Phillips, are you there? Innocent.
Phillips, you're welcome. Can you see?
Is it there? Or maybe Charles Esuga?
Well, let me speak to some of the questions that have come up, and then Phillips and Charles, if you'd like to speak in a bit, that would be fantastic. We'd love to hear from you. So these questions are so important. So one of the first questions from Coyote, how do we bring everyone on board, especially getting participation from different countries? And this is really the key challenge. Developing the guidance is one huge challenge, but bringing people on board is another huge challenge. So what we've done a stakeholder analysis. We've looked at all the different types of stakeholders and broken them down into different groups. And we're working on a strategy specific to different groups. But in general, there's sort of also general strategies. So we realize that, that national level regulators are a really key influencer at country level. So we're deliberately trying to reach out to them and engage them. In Africa, we're hoping to hold a meeting next year specifically for African regulators, to bring them to a physical meeting if we can, to engage them at the continental level, because they're so significant. So we are doing some things regionally, so that standard, what do we call it, for early adopters, countries within the region that are kind of the ones that lead and pull the others along. If we're aiming to target those so that they can be brought on board, and others within their neighboring countries are more likely to follow their lead. So that's one of the strategies. Then obviously lots of social media and working with networks and different groups to get the word out there. But it is definitely a big challenge, and that's why we want we think that by the end of 2025, by the time it's developed, we should have a really good level of engagement, so that nobody's surprised and is learning about this for the first time, but that they're ready to adopt it even before it's fully ready. Those conversations are starting. The country champions like Temitope are also really crucial, because it means that we don't have 200, we only have 19 so far, but we hope to keep recruiting and appointing volunteer country champions who can be a focal point at country level, who know the realities on the ground, who speak the languages, who know the culture, to help us, because we're a small team. So the country champions are absolutely our advocates on the ground at country level. Then the other question was around donors, and again, this is a huge thing. And the question that was asked was, how do we get donors to harmonize their reporting formats? And if you're here at the beginning, I showed you a slide about how donor project reports, the ones that are, you know, for a specific set of transactions, maybe for a specific period, for a specific project, those aren't really the subject of this guidance. This guidance is looking at the annual audited accounts and what that format would be, not at the specific format for any given donor. However, really acknowledge that they're linked, and you can't, if the donors that you're reporting to have a format that is wildly inconsistent with the guidance, that's going to be a problem. We have somebody who's joined us recently on the call, Philip McMinn-Mitchell. He's a member of the PAG, the Practitioner Advisory Group. And this is, as he will testify, this is something we've been talking about a lot in that group, and how important it is that there is some joined upness with donors. Philip, I don't know if you want to say a word or two. Do you want to come in and say hello? Is he still here? He was with us a minute ago. Or maybe he's dropped off. Oh, well, okay, maybe he'll come in. So that's why we have this donor reference group as well, so that we can try and engage some really key donors. So far we have the, obviously Open Society and Ford Foundation and Nippon Foundation, and a few more in the wings, so I won't name publicly, but they're very active and about to sign up. We hope to have about 50 donors, influential donors on that donor reference group, who again will be able to be cheerleaders for this guidance and encouraging other donors to accept it as best practice. There's two aspects. There's the developing the guidance so it doesn't conflict with donor project reports. There's donors endorsing the guidance to say, yes, this is the best way to do your year-end accounts. And then there's a separate project of harmonizing donor reporting, which is not this project, it's another project that's happening separately, which is to say, well, can we have the USAID report and the ECHO report and the report for CEDA and the report for the Ford, and can they all be in a similar way so that we're not reinventing the wheel for different donors every month? So that's equally important, but a different project. So I hope that's clear. They're related, but they're not the same thing. And then another really important question was about compliance. This is a real one, because compliance is actually really at country level, isn't it? So in those countries where we've got strong, efficient, effective, empowered regulators who are hopefully, doing a good job, they would be the ones to, well, you have to submit your accounts to us, and we want them to be in this format. Obviously, there's a huge variety in different countries on the effectiveness of that. I know in the UK it's very strong. I know one of my neighbouring countries, I won't say which one, next to Uganda, has particularly weak governance structures to manage non-profits. So in that case, we would also be relying on donors to help encourage, you could say, enforce compliance, because they don't have the jurisdiction level authority to say all NPOs in a given country, but they could say that this is the best way. Please, when you do your audited accounts on annual audited, do them on this basis. So in that way, we'll be using regulators, and donors would be the key drivers of compliance. So those are some of the questions, and I'm sure we'll have more later. But now I think let's quickly move on to hear some of the challenges. We've already had mention of costs. Do some other people want to come in and mention some of the challenges and some of the benefits that you discussed in your group? And if
In my group,
Francis or Phillips or Charles, if you're here, please do come in. But Temitope, do you want to share in your group first?
Yeah, no, we have Tomi Akinwale that want to share one of the challenges, and also some of the challenges, and also there's a Temitope in my group actually. Oladele, who would like to share some of the benefits that we may see. So over to you, Tomi Akinwale.
Oh, I think maybe people couldn't unmute themselves. Are you able to? Please do unmute yourselves to speak. Don't be shy.
Tomi, are you there? Okay, if not, can we go to Temitope Oladele?
If you're having trouble unmuting yourself, maybe you could type in the chat and I'll see if I can unmute you. I can see Olayinka has his hand up. Super. Olayinka, would you like to come in?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Samantha and Temitope. I was really delighted when I saw Temitope's email. This is a laudable project, and we look forward to seeing this coming to fruition, essentially, because this is really good. It would be good in my group. We discussed a lot about the benefits, what this would hold for us. And this would help comparability of several NGOs when you're considering. And so for donors would be able to access to be able to assess NGOs on an equal footing, which is really good. And then it helps to provide a kind of benchmark. So I look forward to seeing this. I look forward to participating in all the conversations and to see this coming together, really. But also to also mention that it will foster a lot of transparency, because then if everyone is reporting with the same standards, then you can see how well NGOs are performing. You can easily rate them. And I particularly like what you said about the that there's another project for donors. I mean, if donors can also streamline their reporting such that when you're doing grant reporting, you don't have to do several varied reports, that you can just have a template, or the variances are not so much. That would really help. So that's my take on it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wouldn't that be wonderful as well? I know that is even harder to achieve than a standard for the year-end accounts. And in some ways, that project to align donor reports is kind of waiting for this one. Because there is no international standard, each donor is doing their own thing. And that's part of the reason why they're kind of looking to this to see, well, then we can draw on, for example, how do we classify expenses? How do we do cash or accrual based or modified? You know, what are the ways that we can glean from the international IFR for MPO standard that will help us then inform the different donor reports? So in a way, they're kind of interlinked, and that donor harmonization is slightly waiting on this project. So they're trying to move ahead as well. They're doing some things, which is very exciting. Great, and I love your comment about sort of equal footing. And I think at the moment, bigger NGOs or those with resources to produce beautiful annual reports and fantastically impressive financial statements look better to donors. They're more attractive, and it disadvantages smaller or local organizations from getting direct access to funding. And when Temitope talked at the beginning about Ford's values around justice and equity, this is where I think we can really give a foot up to smaller local organizations to be able to present themselves well, to have that equal footing. It's really exciting. Great. Kayonde, do you want to come in? You're welcome. Kayode, sorry, I said it wrong.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you well.
Okay, thank you so much for having me back. From our own end, we talked around the benefits that centered around credibility in terms of for the NGO industry and not-for-profit making organization. We talked around that's the standard we have to simplify the process in terms of reporting, and which is going to save costs. Imagine if you are asked to prepare a return for like 4 of your major donor now, and you have different requirements by donors in the absence of a particular standard to comply with. But once we have a consolidated standard, we know that it will save time and cost in that respect, because just a one account fit for all. Do you understand that? The one account fit for all in place of when we have the standard on board. And we talked around the ability to monitor the inflow into different non-profit organization NPOs, where there will not be too much room for illicit cash movement, and we emphasize that it will help to tame every illegal funding and processing. We talked around the measurement of performance too. There will be comparability, easy to measure performance amongst different NGOs, and disclosure of information to note to the account. I want to believe we still have that as part of the standard. Note to the account, we give different donors avenue to see information so that they will be able to take informed decision as to whether or not they want to put their fund into a particular project. So these are some of the things we talked around: the cost, the efficiency in reporting, the time it will save for us in preparing different accounts for different requirements. So, and the measurement of performance. These are laudable things we envisage that will come out of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Kayode. Really, really interesting reflections there. And I think it's just interesting to the comment that was made earlier about the challenge. The cost of conversion is a challenge, but ultimately when we got over that hump, there should in the longer term be a reduction in costs. So there'll be a short-term increase as there's transition and adoption and training, but in the longer term, it should make the process more efficient and less costly after the initial pain of transition. Thank you so much for those reflections. And I think, as you say, the measurement of performance is absolutely key, isn't it? Financial performance, whatever that means in a not-for-profit, and that's one of the questions that we'll be sort of consulting on, because obviously profit, you can't just have bottom line. That's not what it's about. So how do we talk about performance? What should be on the performance statement and what should its presentation be? That's a really important one. But also the narrative reporting. What's going into the description of the impact? How is the non-profit telling its story in terms of what it's achieving on the ground, apart from the financial numbers and the whatever you have Naira in Nigeria. So yeah, really, really important, and disclosure in the notes, absolutely a key part of the project. So thank you, Kayode, for those comments. KVO, you still have your hand up. Is that because you want to come in, or is it just left over from before? You're welcome to come in if you'd like to, KVO. Or you can lower your hand.
Okay, from my group, we couldn't, and the people that were supposed to speak didn't actually get the chance to, maybe because of their connectivity. But one thing that we're happy about from our reflection is that a lot of things will be, there'll be uniformity, especially when it comes to the area of revenue recognition, to know if any funding from a donor is an income or a revenue or an asset or a liability. So that will be clarified. And also the classification of fixed assets. Should it be expense? Should it be or how do you categorize the assets? At what point? You know, all those things, we are looking forward to how those will be clarified with this project. So that's some of the,
Thank you, Timothy. I'm watching the time and we are moving on. I'm wondering if we should move on to the second part of the presentation, and there will be more time for questions at the end. Also, if you have a question or a comment, but you haven't been able to share it verbally, or there hasn't been time, please do type it in the chat. Any comment, reflection, question, challenge, benefit, please put it in the chat, and that will be a really important record of the opinions of stakeholders in Nigeria. So please do record your opinions in the chat. So we're going to move on now to the second part of the presentation, if that's okay. Just share my screen. If that's okay. Super. So I want to take some time now just to explain what this consultation process is about. We looked at the 3 phases: this first consultation phase, then the exposure draft, and the final guidance. So what's this first stage about? Who should participate? Why? What does this consultation process look like? What's in the consultation paper? And how practically should people respond? So first, let's look at who. First point is that all of you here are the right people, and you should please plan to respond to the consultation. The consultation paper will be issued in January, and that's when the formal, 28th of January, that's when the formal consultation process will open and the paper will be issued. So the types of people we're particularly keen to get feedback from are, of course, regulators, given their influence at country level, auditors, because they've often got a lot of technical experience and exposure to lots of different NPO clients. Funders, as you've crucially mentioned, are really important, influential stakeholders. So we want to hear maybe, so it could be Nigeria foundations and trusts, it could be donors that are homegrown in Nigeria, it could be the Nigeria offices of international donor organizations like Temitope. But it's really crucial to have the Nigeria funder angle. And then of course NPOs, large and small, international, local, the finance managers, the treasurers, you absolutely the right people to respond. And if we look at why, well, without the input from people in Nigeria, the cultural context in Nigeria might not be reflected, and the needs and realities of stakeholders in Nigeria might or might not be reflected in the proposals that are put forward. So what we've really got here is an opportunity to shape the future, which I think is the title of this whole session, really. And future generations of Nigerians can look back and say, because you participated in the process, we've got something that works for us. So it's a real chance to have an impact for the future. And ultimately, from a project level as well, the more people that contribute, the more credibility the project has. If we get contributions from, 1,000 people in 150 countries, that's good. We can take that to donors and say, look, what we're building here is based on this input from so many people from different parts of the world and different stakeholder groups. And it means it's harder for people to say, that's a small thing, we're not interested. It increases the credibility and the adoption, which is crucial. So that's 4 really good reasons why to participate in the consultation process next year. So the consultation process is shaped by this document called the consultation paper. So it's still in the final stages of development, and the PAG and the TAG have spent the last year looking at drafts and making changes and suggestions and changing the direction and guiding the content. So let's just have a look at how it's structured. So after the executive summary, there's an introduction which sets out the objectives of the project, explains who should respond to the consultation paper and how. It's just kind of short, essential reading. Then the bulk of the paper and all the questions that we're looking for your feedback on are in 2 main sections. That's part 1 and part 2, and we'll look at those in a bit more depth shortly. Then there's some supplementary information that gives more context, and there's some of the annexes, for example, show how does IFRS have anything to say about this? What about the guidance in the UK or the New Zealand or existing standards, that they have any guidance on this particular issue. So that's all in the annexes, so you don't have to read it all, but if you're a technical person who wants to know, you can look it up. And then the glossary explains the meanings as intended for the consultation paper, because different terms might have different legal meanings in different contexts, and we want to engage with people who might, well, many people won't have English as their first language. We want to really just help make sure that there's clarity of meaning on terms that we've used. So that's the purpose of the glossary there. So just to give you sort of overview of the questions that we'll be looking for your feedback on. So as I mentioned, there's these two parts. Part one is around sort of framework level issues, like how to describe non-profit organizations or who their stakeholders are. It's written in plain English and it's pitched to be accessible to a really broad audience of stakeholders interested in financial reporting, not just accountants. So part one is divided into chapters, 5 chapters, and each chapter presents a proposal and ends with a request for general matters for comment. So in other words, you're invited to comment on the general level matters presented in the chapter. So these questions tend to take this form. Do you agree with what we've proposed? If not, why not? So in that sense, the question is open. There's a sort of, do you agree, yes, no, short form answer, but there's also that opportunity to share your opinions, some nuance, some, you know, all the richness of your experience and opinion can be shared as well. Then part 2 is about specific accounting issues, like when to recognize grant income, as Temitope mentioned, or when to disclose gifts in kind and things like that. So it's also written in plain English, but it's pitched to be accessible to a more technical audience who are familiar with accounting concepts and language. You don't need to be, you know, president of ICANN, but at least have an ability to engage with some of the financial ideas. So in part 2, each section describes the issue and then presents alternative treatment. So there are about 10 sections in part 2. And then each section ends with a request for specific matters for comment. In other words, you're invited to comment on the specific matters presented in the section. And generally the question is form, do you agree with the description of the issue? Have we described the problem properly? And have we presented the right alternatives? Is this something that we haven't even thought of? And then which alternative do you prefer and why? So there's a sort of straightforward kind of voting system. Here are 4 options that we've come up with that exist in existing standards. What would be your preference? Would you prefer to defer income on the balance sheet until it's spent? Would you prefer to recognize income as it's receivable, grant income, depending on conditions and stipulations and what have for us? So it gives you the option to basically vote like that. So again, it's necessary to have read the section and you have to look at the alternatives before you can meaningfully submit a response. And what that does is it gives us as a project structured responses which we can analyze. And we can also analyze them by stakeholder group and by region and country so that we get a really rich set of feedback. So we've had a sense of the general shape. I just want to take a slightly deeper dive into each of the 5 chapters to give you a taste. And I should mention that the consultation paper is still not final. So what I'm presenting here is what I believe will be in the final, but in case there's something different in the finished version, I've covered my back here. So, oh, Francis is coming back. Hopefully he can speak to us later. So part 1, chapter 1 of the consultation paper is all about the question of which organizations would be considered NPOs for the purpose of this guidance. We talked about NGOs, but it's more complicated than that, isn't it? What about churches? What about social enterprises? What about an NPO that has an income generating thing that does profit? You know, there's quite a lot of grey areas around the outside. So what this chapter does is it presents a proposal of broad characteristics. And it says that here's 4 characteristics. If your organization broadly matches these characteristics, then this guidance will be relevant. Okay, if you have 3 but not 4, well, some of the guidance won't be relevant for you, but maybe other aspects will. So it kind of presents some broad characteristics. And then the question is, do you agree with these broad characteristics? Are they the right ones? If not, why not? What alternative characteristics would you propose and why? So that's chapter 1, all about what do we mean by NPOs? Who would this guidance actually be applicable to? In part 1, chapter 2 of the consultation paper, it's all about the external stakeholders, or these users of the non-profit financial reports. What information do they need? What do they actually want to know? And again, we present a proposal. Do you agree that their information needs are A, B, C, D? And I think what we've got here is information about the NPO's achievement of objectives, about economy efficiency, about compliance with restrictions and regulations, and longer-term financial health, sustainability, reserves maybe. So are those the right things? Do you agree? If not, why not? What alternative areas would you propose and why? So you can put your hat on as a user and say, well, for me as a user, this is what I would love to find out from the financial statements. And if that's not included there, you've got the space to share that. So part 3 is all about aspects of the guidance itself. It presents some proposals. One of the questions is about the guidance being accrual-based. So we are proposing accrual-based guidance rather than cash-based. But we understand that there will be challenges associated with that potentially. So it's really, the question is what challenges, if any, do you foresee with the guidance being accrual-based? And what other approaches might meet the guidance objectives, and explain why. We make the case why we think it's accrual-based. We put pros and cons of different options that we've considered. This has been something that's really engaged the PAG, especially because some donors require cash basis reporting. And so again, part of this conversation about conflicts. What would give us valuable information for different types of users and why? So this is a really key chapter. And then the other thing in this chapter is about the content of the narrative report, which somebody else mentioned as being a really key part. So part 1, chapter 4, about existing financial reporting frameworks. And firstly, we make the case that the guidance really must draw on an existing framework. It can't start with an entirely blank sheet of paper. In terms of credibility, in terms of achieving the project goal in time, in terms of connection with other professional accountancy organizations, it just does make sense. So the 3 existing international frameworks are IFRS, IPSAS, and IFRS for SME. So what we've done is, none of them are perfect. None of them are the ideal starting point. They're written for governments or for for-profit businesses. Some of them are large, some of them are smaller, some of them are updated all the time, some of them are more stable over time. So we've set out some criteria that we think will help us choose which is the best out of 3 options, none of which is perfect. And then ask the question, agree with these criteria and the way we've assessed against them? And if not, what other criteria should we think about that are important and why? And then the final chapter, which is the kind of culmination of where it's all been leading, we propose a model, which is basically to start with IFRS for SME, because it's more targeted at small and medium. It's not revised so often, it's shorter. Not that it's perfect, but it seems to be the best of the 3 according to our understanding and analysis. So the crucial question, do you agree with the model that's proposed? If not, what alternative do you suggest? We also propose to pick from full IFRS, IPSAS, and other national standards to help us plug the gaps for the unique aspects for non-profit accounting that aren't covered in IFRS SME. So do you have any concerns about this? Do you agree with the model? So you've got that chance to share your opinion about what we're proposing. So that's a sort of snapshot of the consultation part 1. 5 chapters with 2 to 4 questions per chapter. I've just given you a sort of sample of those questions, and I hope that gives you a feel. And I hope you have some strong opinions and you think, actually, I really want it this way or that way, which is great. We want to hear those opinions. That's what this is all about. Okay, so that was part 1. This is now part 2, which is looking at unique issues that are unique to the non-profit sector. It's kind of the gaps that IFRS or IFRS for SME doesn't tell us what to do. So these are the specific sector-specific accounting issues. So again, this is the list as per this consultation paper as it is now. And this list has been decided, and part of the beginning actually of this section 2 says how have we arrived at this list? What's been the process for identifying which issues should be covered? So we've got issues like, you know, the financial statement presentation. How do we show financial performance? Do we do fund accounting with columns like in the UK? Do we stop at the profit line, or we do a retained comprehensive income type thing? There's lots of options. They're all, you know, suggested there. Vertical or horizontal balance sheet. There's lots of different options. Then there's something about narrative reporting. So if it is to be included, what should it cover? How should we classify expenses? Should it be by nature, like salaries, transport, rent, etc.? Should it be by function? If it's by function, which functions? The UK has, you know, charitable expenditure, which is, again, that's a word that isn't very internationally, but program, admin and fundraising, or something else. What is a good, meaningful way to classify expenses on the face of the financial statements? And then income recognition, and that would include grants and non-exchange transactions, and also these in-kind donations. Fundraising costs, how to account for grants made. When do you expense it? Do you expense it when it's committed? Do you expense it when it's paid? Do you expense it when they've accounted for it? Everybody does their own thing because there's no guidance. So let's get some agreement. What about these assets? Paid said, you know, do we expense them, which is what the donors require? Should we capitalize them, even if they're donor funded? What if they don't generate revenue? The whole basis for capitalizing assets in IFRS is because they generate revenue, but our assets are held to achieve a social purpose. It's an entirely different premise. So what changes do we need that make it relevant for us? Then inventory. What if we've got medical supplies, or I don't know, relief supplies, who knows, all sorts of different things that you might use or distribute as part of your activities, and you've got them held at the year end. Normally we have to value at the lower of cost and net realizable value, but if you're not going to sell them, does that mean they have no value? Well, you know, all those sorts of questions. This is something that's relevant for us as a sector, and the standards don't give us guidance. And then the last two are really important. How do we define the reporting entity? When we've got joint projects, when we've got a lot of control, whether maybe is the, and it's the same with the acting on behalf of another entity. It's very similar. Are you acting as an agent on behalf of somebody else? Are you acting on your own behalf? What if I'm a branch? Am I a reporting entity? You know, so we had to looking at some of the principles that would help decide which parts of an organization should report and what should be consolidated or not. So that's the kind of overview, if you like. As you can see, these issues are a bit more technical in nature. So we won't go through every single one now. I won't go through any of them now. But what we will do is we'll hold webinars on each one of these issues. So you can do a deeper dive. We'll have some explainer videos that give a bit more deep dive into each of those topics, so that when you share your views, you're kind of confident of what's being presented. So hopefully that look at part 1 and part 2 has made you think, wow, I would like to share my opinions and my perspective. So the only question left is how. So we'll be working to make it as easy as possible to share your views. The first thing is you don't have to respond to all of it. You can respond to just part 1 or part 2, or just one section or one there's the option to respond to the bits that are relevant and you have an opinion on. But I think we're looking at surveys, we're looking at template Word documents, we're looking at different ways on the web where it can be easy to interact with different sections of the document. But when we do launch next year, we'll have some videos to go along with it that make it really clear exactly how to respond. And the website will also have links to download different sections where you can submit your responses. So also in the middle of next year, we plan to hold roundtables. Now it says on the slide country level roundtables, but we discussed just last week, we're thinking we might have more like 13 regional roundtables that will be online. So there'll be one for West Africa. Mind you, there might be one for French-speaking West Africa and one for English-speaking. I don't know, we'll have to look. We'll work with Temitope to see what works in terms of making it easy for people to engage. Where we'll basically have the chance to have more of a meeting and a discussion on the different issues as well. But the main point will be the website. That will be the main way to engage with this consultation process. So part one, the consultation will be open until July, and then for part two, it will be open until September, because there's just a bit more content and it's a bit more engaged. So that's the plan. So if you've signed up for project newsletters, if you haven't, do that now. If you've signed up for the newsletter, you will get an email or a notification telling you that the consultation process is launched, it's open, please come and submit. So 28th of January is the big date, and there'll be a video that comes out and we'll have it will be all over. You won't miss it, hopefully, especially if you've signed up. So that will be the time to start getting ready to participate. The single most important message we'd like you to go away with from this whole meeting is please respond to this consultation process. Register on the newsletter so that you get notified, and please share your voice. This is a really wonderful opportunity to shape the future, and your voice and your opinion, your perspective really matters. Yeah. So stop there and hand back to Temitope.
Yeah, in case anyone has a question relating to the consultation process or the consultation paper, so please, you can ask in the chat now. The floor is open. So before we finish, we would like to tell you about ways you can engage with the project. So Samantha, can you tell us about the online community forum?
Okay, so unfortunately it's not active right now because it's had a glitch, but we hope it will be active next week. There's an online space. It's a bit like sort of online Facebook or LinkedIn, where you can meet other people who are interested in this from all over the world, all different stakeholders. You can connect with individuals, and there'll be groups, group chats, there'll be threads of conversations around different issues. So this is a really great place to connect with other people, share your opinions, have conversations, and just to keep up to date with and engage with the project. So that's the kind of place to engage with the project and other stakeholders, is in the forum. So in the follow-up email after this, we'll give you a link to join. But as I say, it's not active right now, but we hope it will be from next week. So if you go to the website, it's in the top right there, you can see there's a thing that says forum, and that's basically the way in.
Okay.
So we move on to today, could we take some more questions? Let's just pause and give people a chance, shall we? Maybe I'll just stop sharing and we can have a chance for some more questions. How are we doing?
Okay.
Yeah.
I think Philip is back now. If he has anything to say, because he's very excited about this project, and he said he's really very interested. So I don't know if Philip Innocent is here to just share one or two things. His reflection about this project. Is Philip there? Or Charles Esuga? If they are not, then any other person, you can just raise your hand in the chat room so that you can come up. Questions, reflections?
a button on my screen that says ask all to unmute, but I don't want you all to unmute, but I'm hoping this will make it easier for those who want to speak to unmute.
Hi, hello.
Come in, yes.
Hi, Tokwe. Actually, I'm really excited to join the meeting, though I've been having some internet challenges from my location. And Tokwe, I know we've had a lot of discussions regarding this, and I wish, I don't know whether Mr. Charles Esuga is here. I think before Tokwe brought this to our attention, we had some concern regarding standards. Our experience is very, very intense. We've worked across multiple donors here in Africa, ranging from host governments to foreign governments to private philanthropies and funds across the world. This concern has always been, how do we report? You know, we have a lot of donors coming with multiple requests. This is how we do things. This is how we do ours in our own country. But I'm so excited that we have this fora. I think carrying it forward, we should be able to come out with a technical document where it can be adopted internationally as standard across donors. I know here in Nigeria, the government of Nigeria, there are a group of individuals that are making attempts to try to bring up some standards that will be applicable to all international not-for-profit organizations in Nigeria. I told them it's going to be very, very difficult for you if this thing is not, it doesn't have an international outlook. But I will be talking with Tokwe. I will try and bring those informations to her knowledge to see how we can take it to the next standard and see how we can bring some of those standards that are being proposed to harness a document that is workable and adoptable by all of us. Thank you once again for this opportunity, and I must confess that I'm excited and I'm ready to give out my time and resources to see how we can take this you know, to a workable level. Thank you very much, Tokwe. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks to Samantha too.
Thank you. That's fantastic, Innocent. Really appreciate that. And absolutely, Temitope is your kind of focal point for any Nigeria intelligence that you have of something else going on, or because sometimes people will come up and we want to make sure they feed into one thing. So just keep us aware, keep Temitope aware so that she can make sure we're sort of joined up in things that happen, which would be superb. Let me briefly share my screen to show you how to sign up. Yeah. So, no, not this one. Sorry, share screen. I want to take you to. Oh, sorry, forgive me. Here we go. So this is what I want to share with you. Can you see the website? Yeah. So this is the ifr4npo.org website, and on the landing page there is this subscribe here to the newsletter and join the forum here. You can still join the forum, but it's not active at the moment, but you can still join it and subscribe to the newsletter. I'd encourage you to do both. So that's the quick answer to how do I sign up. The other very important question in the chat is IFRS involved? So yes, is the short answer. The more complicated answer is that a big survey was done in 2014 to see if there was appetite, was there a demand for this standard. And the overwhelming evidence came back, 72% of people agreed that in all different parts of the world that we do need this standard. That evidence was presented to IFRS, ASB, the International Accounting Standard Board, who are the owners of IFRS, and it was also presented to IPSASB, the International Public Sector Accounting Standards Boards. And both of those boards met to decide whether they should develop this guidance. And both boards discussed it, and they both agreed that it was necessary. They both agreed it was needed. And they both agreed that they didn't have the mandate or the resources to do it themselves. So yes, on the tag, on the technical advisory group, we have an official observer from the IFRS. So it's not an IFRS project. It's not something they're officially saying, yes, this is something we're doing, but it definitely has our blessing, their blessing. They know it's, they come to all the advisory group meetings, and they're keeping a close watch, especially if we want to base something on IFRS for SME, we need their copyright. We can't do it without their blessing, absolutely. So they're very much involved. And then in terms of IPSASB, the chair of IPSASB, he has that role as 75% of his time. 25%, he's the chair of this project's technical advisory group. So he wears two hats. They're independent hats, I should make very clear, but certainly IPSASB is very much involved and is aware of this project and is following it closely. So yes, those two big international standard setters, it's not happening without them, let me put it that way. Very important, because if they said no and if they don't know about it, this is all a bit academic. It needs to have their say behind it when we finally launch. We're also hoping that in the long run, we don't know what the answer will be, but we need to make sure this guidance is sustainable. We need to make sure it has an owner and it has a home and it has a way of being maintained over time. So our hope is, and there's absolutely no guarantee of this yet, but our hope is that either ISB or IPSASB might be able to take it on to maintain it in the longer term, even if they haven't had the resources to develop it. We don't know if that will happen, there's absolutely no guarantee, but we're certainly thinking even now about the long-term sustainability of the guidance. So it's a really important question.
So, Samantha, can I go ahead?
Yeah, are there any other questions? If you have them, don't hesitate to put them in the chat. Let me go back to sharing the slide deck. Oh, hang on a second. Yes. Sorry. There we go.
Okay, so what are the next steps? Samantha said it severally that we should please subscribe to the bi-monthly newsletter to keep abreast of development and make sure you're invited to participate in the consultation process. You know, follow the project on social media, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and also make comments and share the posts among your network. And if you're excited about this project and its aim, please can also, we also ask that you ask the organization to endorse it on their logo and also support page of our website. So you will shortly receive an email with an evaluation and a link to the meeting recording. And we also collate all the emails summarizing the questions and also the benefits and challenges and the next steps forward. So we just want to encourage everyone as a country, because this is actually for Nigeria. So, you know, in the future, when all this come into fruition, we will be happy that we're part of the process, you know, as part of the think tanks, and you know, we will take ownership of it. And it will be very wonderful. And also for the audit firm, it's also a good one because you'll be able to interpret to your clients. You know, you'll be so proud because you are part of it from the onset. So I will encourage everyone to subscribe to the bi-monthly newsletter and also follow on Twitter, be part of it. So before we go, I don't know if we can all put on a camera, if we can just have a short picture, if it's possible. Can we all put on a camera and have a group photograph? If that is possible. Yes, this is wonderful.
Lovely.
Thank you, everyone. It's so nice seeing all your faces.
It is. Are you going to take the photo, Temitope?
Yeah, you can take one. Yeah, I will take one. Then you can also take one.
Great.
Just a minute, please. Yeah.
You'll take it with your phone.
Excellent. So I just want to thank everyone again for participating, and also we thank Samantha for presenting such a wonderful paper, and we'll keep you abreast, everyone, and we'll keep communicating. So we're taking it beyond this meeting. So thank you once again, everyone. I've enjoyed the rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
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 Thanks.
Bye, everyone.